today. So today we'll be chatting about the B Corp certification journey, a really interesting topic, and I think something that really intrigues a lot of the startups that we work with, but is also got this layer of uncertainty of when we should be considering this pathway if it's something that startups are involved with. We have Kirsty joining us today, who we're really lucky to have had as a Boomerang Labs mentor for a little while now. And she's been really great in all of our programs with our early and late stage circular economy startups, and talking about why this sort of certification can bring some great benefit for the startup in enabling its growth in a sustainable and ethical way. But that's why we're really excited to be able to bring this out to our broader network and to get some questions and get some engagement with some other startups considering this pathway. So to begin with, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the various lands on which we all work and live today. I am based in Hunter Valley, so for me that's a Wonnarua and a Wappo people, and we extend our respects to elders past, present and emerging. A very quick snapshot of who we are in case this is the first time you've heard of us. Boomerang Labs is a circular economy accelerator. We're really proud to be working with entrepreneurs and small businesses that are embedding circular principles in their businesses. And what that basically means is they're designing out waste, they're keeping products and materials in use for longer, and they're regenerating natural systems. They're not all necessarily doing all of those things at once. They might explode, but they're all playing a part in enabling that transition to a circular economy. We support startups in lots of different ways. So today, as part of our various events that we get involved with, there's our contribution to education of startups and enabling networking and collaboration in this landscape. We also provide 3 key programs to support ideation, development of MVP, and scaling and commercialization for circular startups. Didn't mean to put that transition in there, but anyway, save the date. We do these webinars monthly, and next month we have Elizabeth Kalen coming in, who has been involved for many years in the Accelerating Commercialization Grant, which has just finished up, but she's going to be joining us for our webinar to talk about some specific challenges and strategies that circular economy startups and purpose-driven sustainable startups experience, and give some guidance to that topic. So you'll be getting a notification of that when we send out the recording from this webinar, so feel free to register for that one too. So without wasting any more time, I'll hand over to Kirsty now, who will give a presentation, and as always, we will make sure we have some time for Q&A, but also feel free to add questions as we go through the chat, and we can either address via messaging back, or perhaps it's something we can discuss more broadly as a group. So I'll stop sharing there, Kirsty.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. All right, I'll try and share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay? Yep.
Yep.
There we go. Great. Thank you. So yeah, thanks for having me today. I think I know some of the Boomerang alumni, but great to see more people interested in the B Corp movement. So I wear a couple of hats. I'm a B consultant, so I've been through B Labs training. This was back in 2020 to be a B Corp consultant in this Australia, New Zealand region. But I'm also, I work at a startup myself. So I'm COO at an electric vehicle startup that came out of Energy Labs, so kind of close to the Boomerang, called EV. So I'm kind of part entrepreneur and part sort of sustainability consultant, but ultimately they both feed into my 2 loves, which is the sustainable economy and also the circular and sharing economy as well. So a bit about the agenda today. We are going to talk about what a B Corp is, in case you're kind of not familiar with the kind of the history and context of the B Corp movement, what the benefits are of becoming a B Corp, an overview of the actual assessment itself, and then we'll talk about the journey to certification. Lastly, we'll talk about some considerations. So I think this is quite important for kind of any early stage businesses that, there's a lot of buzz around B Corp, and obviously I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I do this for a living. I love the B Corp movement, but there are things to think about before you kind of commit to the journey. So, everything is very positive and very kind of pro B Corp, but we'll get to the very end and I'll kind of say, well, what are the things you really need to consider before jumping on to kind of this journey and committing to becoming a B Corp. So we'll discuss that at the very end. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time left for questions as well. A lot of information to go through. I talk quite fast, so hopefully we'll get through it all. So yeah, let's jump right in. So what is a B Corp? These are certified B Corp is a business that has gone through the process of becoming B Corp certified. It's a third-party certification. But when you are a B Corp, you're essentially showing that you balance purpose and profit. In Australia specifically, you are legally required to consider the impact that you have as a business on your stakeholders. And there's actually a commitment you have to make through changing your constitution. I'll go into this sort of later on in the presentation. But these B Corps also form a community of leaders using business as a force for good. So it is a movement, and it's something that, I'm very, kind of new to that, before working within the B Corp movement, and very much saw businesses that these individual things, these individual companies that see competitors and, see them as rivals, when actually the B Corp movement is about us coming together and having a single goal, which is improving the world through business. And that's really new and really unique to get your head around, that actually you can collaborate with traditionally your competitors to actually work towards the same goal, which is using business as a force for good. So it is a new mentality within business itself. And I've just found it one of the most rewarding things being part of this movement is seeing that collaboration in action. So who can become a B Corp? Essentially any for-profit company. So unfortunately, not-for-profits cannot become B Corps. You have to be a for-profit business. Anyone from a sole trader up to a multinational. You might be familiar with quite a few big multinationals that have joined the movement. Nespresso, Danone, Unilever Australia has recently joined as well. They've become a B Corp. But any size company. So you could just be an individual sole trader. So it's essentially encouraging everybody who is in business to adopt this impact framework. The only things you have to be in business for 12 months. And this is essentially from your first full-time employee, from your first supplier or your first customer. So you can kind of choose from that definition. When is the point of your business existing? It's not actually when you incorporate. It's from one of those three kind of points in your business roadmap. But there are things that obviously you can do in the build up towards that 12-month mark. So you can only submit your application in 12 months, but obviously there's lots you can do to kind of set things up in the background before you're ready to kind of submit. And actually, I would really recommend that if you are a new business, it's probably easier to start adopting a lot of the B Corp framework at the beginning, because if you're in business for 10 years and you're doing things a certain way, and then you want to try and really bake impact into how you do things, it's a little bit harder to retrofit things. So if you are a new company, looking at the B Corp framework is a really good start, like from the get-go. So a few little definitions here. So B Lab is the not-for-profit that runs the B Corp movement. The B Impact Assessment, that I also call the BIA for short, is the actual assessment that you complete to become a B Corp. And then once you've gone through the process of submitting your application and being reviewed by B Lab, then you become a certified B Corp. So a little bit about the history of B Lab and the B Corp movement. So it actually came out of basketball, which not a lot of people know. So back in 2006 was when the B Corp movement was born. The founders of And One, which was the second biggest basketball apparel brand in the States, they actually sold before they kind of set up B Corp movement. And they realized that so many things that they had created in the business in terms of the culture were dismantled when they sold the business. So they actually birthed the B Corp movement to really help distill everything that you build up within a business. So it's legally enshrined that culture has to be taken on with whoever buys the business. And it's interesting, we can see that that same thing happened with Ben & Jerry's when they sold to Unilever. Everything that Ben & Jerry's had done in the lead up to kind of being acquired, was distilled in that acquisition. So I think it was definitely, that's a great example of how the B Corp framework is really protecting everything, all the impact that companies are building. It's a bit of a timeline here in terms of how it rolled out. So the B Lab was founded in 2006. The first 80 companies were B Corp certified by 2007. So you can kind of see that it's starting to build the momentum then. And then in 2010 was the first benefit corporation legislation in the US. And what this means is that B Lab actually worked with policymakers to create a whole new business entity, legal entity. So you've got your S Corps and C Corps in America. There's actually a B Corp, a benefit corporation is a legal entity in 30 of the US states, and not all of them yet. And so this essentially is again, like the B Corp movement, it means that you are, as a business, you are legally enshrining impact and balancing that purpose and profit, as a business, and that's actually enshrined in your legal entity. We don't have the same legislation here in terms of how companies can set up, but we do have a commitment that if you become a B Corp in Australia, you actually have to change your constitution. There's a particular clause that I'll cover shortly about what that means, what you're signing up to. So B Lab formed in this region in 2014. 2019 was quite a pivotal period in ethical business, and obviously in the B Corp movement. A number of B Corps got together and they put a full page ad in the New York Times saying that really the Business Roundtable, which is the big business leaders in America who come together to decide on kind of like really what the scope is for the future of capitalism. These B Corps came together and put an ad in the New York Times to talk to the Business Roundtable saying, look, we need to redefine what capitalism is. And since like the early 1970s, there's been this whole understanding that, the purpose of business is to drive a shareholder return, right, which is this shareholder primacy model. This hasn't worked. So, in the last 50 years, what we've seen is a bigger gap between the lowest paid and the highest paid employee. Workers' rights have been eroded. We can all agree that the environment has not been treated very well by business and the growth of capitalism. So the shareholder primacy model of that the most important thing, the only thing for the purpose of a business is to drive shareholder value, has not been really working for humanity. So this New York Times ad actually was to put pressure on the Business Roundtable to redefine what capitalism is, and it worked. So in 2019, the Business Roundtable said the purpose of business is to benefit all Americans, which kind of leaves out the rest of the world, but let's see that it's a bit of a start. It should be, obviously benefits everyone. So that was obviously very pivotal to the movement and really supported in kind of what everyone in the movement to that date had been doing. 2020 was a real, kind of crucial moment for the B Corp movement, because it's when there was such an increase in use of the B impact assessment, and there was a huge increase in the number of people actually looking to become a certified B Corp. And that's really off the back of, obviously the pandemic, everybody realizing that, wow, the companies that did really well were the ones who really looked after their staff and were able to just not focus on profits in the short term and really think about their stakeholders and how to protect them. So it really, the pandemic really refocused everybody in terms of what businesses, what they should be focusing on. That was really great for B Corps and impact in general. And we're now at over 6,000 B Corps worldwide, which is really exciting, over 500 in our region as well. So it's really growing. I definitely think that, I've been in the movement at the right time. It just feels very exciting. Like even 3 years ago, I'd say, half of people I spoke to wouldn't know what a B Corp was. And now it feels that there's a lot more awareness, and it just feels like for a lot of businesses, it's like not just a nice to have, it's kind of crucial to their industry. So yeah, very exciting. 6,000 B Corps worldwide, over 500 in Australia and New Zealand, really varied across all industries. When you start the assessment, you pick your industry, pick your track, and you'll see there's everything there from kind of agriculture to manufacturing, service-based businesses. I think one of the, the kind of misrepresentations of B Corp is it's for products, it's always for things. But, I've worked with a lot of architecture firms, marketing agencies, digital agencies, like any type of business can join the movement and use the framework. Just got some examples here of local B Corps that you might know. I think definitely Nespresso was a bit of a surprise for everyone, because obviously there's like these very kind of diehard like ethical brands such as Patagonia really leading the way. I'm very encouraging of the larger companies joining, because that's when we're really going to have the shift. So, Nespresso is definitely not perfect. No company is, especially on like multinationals, but being a B Corp, it means the focus is on them, and they're really going to have to, you know, walk the talk. So I think it's actually, from my perspective, I think the more companies within this movement, the better it is, the quicker we will work, you know, move towards a more kind of ethical economy. So B Lab is, you know, their theory of change means that they're not just here to certify businesses and have kind of the best of the best. Really, they're you know, it's an education platform. So what's really great is that the assessment itself is free, so any company can use it. So wherever you are in your B Corp journey, I would definitely recommend jumping in and having a play with the assessment, because you only pay when you actually submit the application. So you can kind of use the framework to actually measure and improve on your impact, which is what B Lab is really encouraging. So over 100,000 businesses worldwide have actually used the tool. And I think that you should go ahead and use that to set up your business or to try and track and improve your impact, even if you're not intending to become a B Corp. So yeah, it means that the B Corp framework is completely accessible and completely free. So what are the benefits of becoming a B Corp? First of all, this impact framework. So like I said, even if you're not going on to become a certified B Corp, using the framework is the most holistic approach to impact. It really covers off these 5 key areas of business, which is governance, your kind of transparency and your ethics, your workers, so your team, community, environment, and customers as well. So it's really looking at all of your stakeholders and how you have an impact on them and how you can improve on their impact as well. So it's a really great tool for that. But also by becoming a certified B Corp, you're actually being held to account. So your score is public. So this is a way for it, and especially if you're talking about becoming a B Corp, it really puts the spotlight on you. Like I was saying about Nespresso, it's like, you know, people are now saying, well, you know, you've gone down this journey, you've got to continue that improvement and really be transparent about what you're doing. So it really does hold you to account rather than, you know, sort of saying you're doing certain things. And I think in this era of greenwashing and purpose washing, it's even more important. And you're joining a community of change makers. So there's subgroups such as the B Corp Climate Collective, but also there's kind of local meetups. And this is what I really love about the community. Like I said, lots of B Corps coming together, working on initiatives together, like the full page in the New York Times, B Corp saying, well, this is the policy that we want to affect. So yeah, if you are thinking about becoming a B Corp, and even when you become a B Corp, definitely go to the local meetups. There's local meetups in Sydney, Melbourne, Northern Rivers. Great way to connect with other people on the journey. I think if you're going down the B Corp route, you're looking to become certified, meeting other kind of, you know, prospective B Corps and supporting each other on the journey, keeping each other accountable, forming little groups together about how you can push each other kind of to get there, because it can be a lot of work. So you can meet them by just joining the local meetups. There's a coffee morning once a month in Sydney if you're interested. And attracting talent is a key benefit of becoming a B Corp. So over 50% of millennials and Gen Z are looking for meaning in their work and looking for purposeful jobs. So this is something to think about in terms of future-proofing your business. If you want to attract that talent, working towards B Corp certification is showing that you put impact at the heart of what you do as a company. So again, it's kind of making you accountable, but also putting a stamp on, so when you're attracting talent. And attracting customers. So obviously customers are getting more savvy. Again, trying to weed through sort of companies kind of sharing their impact stories that might not be as kind of honest and transparent. So again, because it is a lot of work to become a B Corp and it's quite a hard process, obviously shoppers are aware that it is a stamp of like being holistically looking across your business in terms of the impact you have on people and the planet. And attracting investors. This is something to think about. 1/4 of investments in Australia are impact investments. There's a lot of family offices that are coming up who only invest in sustainable businesses. There's a number of VC funds which are B Corps themselves, such as Alberts, Giant Leap, Triple. So by becoming a B Corp, it's really, again, it's kind of giving that kind of stamp of approval that you're really baking in impact to what you do. And that should hopefully attract investment down the line as well. And finally, I don't like to talk about this too often, but it will increase your revenue. And I've got a little quote down there from Simon Sinek from The Infinite Game that profit is not an outcome. This is something we really need to remember. It's the fuel that enables business to achieve more. But it is something to think about in terms of like actually during the pandemic, there was a study on B Corp. I think this is the quote here: B Corps in the UK actually thrived during that time. So it's really setting you up as a sustainable business. So again, it shouldn't be the driving force. You shouldn't want to become a B Corp just because it's going to make you more money, but it will be the knock-on effect because you're setting yourself up to weather the storms and obviously be thinking about the long term. So the BA Impact Assessment is the tool online which anyone can use, like I said, to measure and track and improve on your impact on people and the planet. But it's also the way that you actually submit your application to become a certified B Corp. So the standards are created by a group of they call them the Standards Advisory Council, a group of academics, business leaders, not-for-profits across the globe. And there's 5 areas within the assessment itself which you're being measured on: governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. It's important to note that the standards are currently being reviewed, and this is actually quite a pivotal thing which might determine whether you look to become a B Corp now or later down the line. So at the moment, there is only one thing that you need to do to become a B Corp in Australia, and everything else you kind of pick and choose your own adventure to kind of the 80 points that you need to kind of get over to the line to submit. The one thing you need to do is you need to amend your constitution. You can't get around that. You have to commit to that. You can't become a B Corp without it. But there has been some backlash that this kind of route to 80 points means that companies can do really well in one area and then not so great in other areas. So there's actually the new standards that are coming out, which will be released at some point next year, means that actually there will be 10 areas which all B Corps will need to meet. This means it's going to get harder. So it will be a little bit more difficult to become a B Corp, I imagine, from next year. But I think for the movement, it'll be better because it will really ensure that everybody is thinking holistically about that impact. They're not just looking into the environment and being, poor with their workers or not giving back to their community or what that is. We have seen, most B Corps amazing, but there have been a few kind of like outliers that do get a lot of press. And I think, a great example would be Brewdog, who have decided not to renew their certification, quite interestingly. They're a brewer out of the UK, based in Scotland, and they did lots of great things for their community. They became a B Corp. They were very revered in terms of their approach. They did lots for the environment. And then it came out that they had quite a toxic work culture, and there was over 100 old ex-employees signed a letter saying about how the work culture was just, really difficult, especially for women working within the business. So I think, the new standards hopefully should prevent any outliers kind of, obviously slipping through the cracks like this. With 6,000 B Corps, I'm really pleased that there's only been a couple of stories like this, and there's always going to be a few bad eggs. But hopefully with, with the new standards, it means it's really going to hold everyone to account across all of the sections. For now, it's still the same standard. So until they actually switch over, we haven't been, we don't know the exact date, but it will be probably at midpoint next year. So until that moment has been announced, you can still go through with the current assessment. And if you submit with the current questions, you will stay in the queue, and they will honor that will be the assessment. Those will be the standards that you're adhering to. So whether you wait and see what the new standards are, so you know what you're agreeing to, that could be one approach. But if you're really committed to being a B Corp and you know that, like, well, in the time that it takes for me to recertify in 3 years, I'm going to be able to do even more, I'm ready to commit to that, then yeah, I would say don't hold back and go ahead and submit as soon as possible, really. So there's 2 ways of scoring points within the assessment. There's operations points and there's impact business model points. Most companies go through to become a B Corp just on operations points. So this is how you do your day-to-day practice in an impactful way. So this could be that you have an office and you really think about recycling all of the company waste, or you look to move on to a green energy plan. So it's not kind of the core business of what you do, but it's ensuring that everything you do as a business has some follow-on impact from that. Impact business models, like I said, less than half the companies who become B Corps actually achieve one of these impact business models. This is where impact is baked into who you are and what you do. So essentially, this would be very explicit in your mission statement. And I've got some examples of what impact business models you could meet per section, just so you're kind of aware of them. And it would be really great if you want to find out more, there's a list of IBMs online that you can read through as well. So some of them might be things that you're already doing, especially if you're in the circular economy space, that your mission is doing something that is contributing to the circular economy. You most likely would meet one of the environment IBMs. But it might be that there's you don't currently have an IBM that you do within your business, or it could be something that you want to work towards, because there's some really great IBMs that as a young business, you might be like, wow, I'd love to work towards that. And it's just good to have it on your radar, so you can kind of, over the next sort of 3 years before you recertify, it's something that you aim to kind of bake into who you are. So I'll run through these now. So starting with the governance section, the governance section on the operations points really looks at your structure, your mission, your theory of change, which is your impact strategy. It looks at your ethics and transparency, and how you engage with stakeholders, how you get stakeholder feedback. Because remember, it's one crucial thing of becoming a B Corp is considering all your stakeholders, right? And that really leads on to the one IBM that's in governance, which is the one thing that you have to commit to become a B Corp. So I talked about this constitutional amendment that you have to do to become a B Corp in this region. So essentially what that means is you have to put in word for word an amendment to your current constitution. A lot of small businesses don't even have a constitution. You're using just the replaceable rules. You can talk to your accountant or lawyer about what you have. It means that if you do have a constitution, you just slot this constitutional amendment in. You obviously need to sign something. Any directors would have to sign that. And then also, if you don't have a constitution, you can just create one, but ensure this amendment is this wording is in there as well. So there's two things that you are signing up to in this constitutional amendment. One is your purpose statement. The purpose of your company will be to deliver returns to shareholders, traditional definition of what it means to be a business, whilst having an overall positive impact on society and the environment. So again, that's just distilling what this kind of balancing purpose and profit thing is. And the second thing within the Constitution Amendment is that there's a clause stating that you will consider all stakeholders in your decision making as a business. Now, this isn't this kind of very, lateral business structure where every single stakeholder gets a vote. It's a democracy. You still have this pyramid of decision makers for the business at the top, but you will be legally signing up to considering how decisions you make as a business affect all of those stakeholders. A really great example here is so PowerShop, who are a energy retailer. They were a few years ago really respected within the renewable energy space. They were owned by Meridian, which is one of the largest wind manufacturers, wind farm manufacturers in the Southern Hemisphere. They sold to Shell. So lots of people were signed up to PowerShop as customers because they loved that they were 100% renewable carbon offset. A lot of people who worked at PowerShop were really passionate about working there because they were on this mission to, obviously push forward the renewables revolution. And Shell maybe doesn't fit in with that strategy. So there was a really interesting blog post that Andrew Davies, who's the CEO of B Lab, wrote about what would have happened if PowerShop was a B Corp when they were acquired by Shell. Probably wouldn't have gone through, because PowerShop would have spoken to their customers, would have spoken to their team, and they would have found out that actually this isn't the best decision for them, that it has a negative impact on them. And this deal with Shell probably did very well for a very few number of people in the company, but a lot of other stakeholders were impacted. And I know that PowerShop lost a lot of customers off the back of that. So it's kind of bringing in this idea that, just at least informing them, getting that feedback, understanding what your stakeholders need and want, and considering in that. Maybe PowerShop still would have gone ahead with that sale because they might have said, well, look, the impact that we can have will be bigger. but who knows? So I think that's just a really interesting example, and just really about how, as a business, you might just be one person, but there's so many people get impacted or are touched by you existing. So it's just a really great way of looking at how we do business. In the workers section, you're essentially looking at your people strategy, your culture, your org design, and how you engage, empower, and nurture your employees. In terms of IBMs, they're quite out there. I haven't seen many of our clients go through worker IBMs, because they really focus a lot on kind of cooperatives. And this workforce development one is quite unique. And just give you an example. So workforce development is where businesses are recognized for providing quality jobs and job training for chronically underemployed populations. Second Shop is a good example. They are a coffee shop in the UK, and they only employ homeless people. So that would be a great example of how, who they are, and their mission is very much about giving employment to these underserved groups. So worker IBMs are a little bit tricky to meet, and like I said, I see them as being less common. In the community section for operational points, you're really being looked at the diversity of your team and also of your supply chain. And then also looking how you give back to your community. So really looking at your corporate give back strategy, and also how you engage your supply chain, but also how you look to improve the social environmental standards of your supply chain. And then also how you publicly advocate for positive social and or environmental change. On the IBM side of things, we see these are a lot more common than kind of the workers. Design to give is a very common one. So this is where you have an ongoing and public commitment to give a significant portion of your profits, revenues, or equity to charitable causes. Great example there would be Who Gives a Crap. They are a toilet paper company, but they donate 50% of their profits to clean sanitation projects across the world. If tomorrow they said, yeah, we're just going to scrap that bit and we're just going to be, a bamboo toilet company, they'd probably lose a lot of their business. It's so baked into who they are. It's in their mission. People know them for that. And that's, again, a really clear, definition between what an IBM is and what operational points are. If an IBM is something that can't be detached from who you are and what you're doing, it's your purpose. It's out there on your website. It's what people know you for. Another great example in the community space is the supply chain poverty alleviation. If you haven't heard of or even tried Tony's Chocolonely, I'd 100% recommend you do. It's a really great chocolate brand out of the Netherlands. Their mission is to end slavery within the cocoa supply chain, and that not just for them, but for the whole cocoa supply chain. So it's really looking at how they can work with other players, their competitors, to really improve standards across the board. Their chocolate bar is, when you open it, it's like all these different size pieces and it's really hard to break. And that's because they said that the chocolate industry is unfair. So until there's fairness within the chocolate industry, then it'll be unfair sharing their chocolate pieces, which I think is brilliant. And they've just got really great branding. They're just, they're a fantastic brand. But, again, if they just stripped that back about what they were in business for, if they weren't an ethical chocolate company and they just went, you know what, it doesn't really matter that much, people would definitely stop buying their product. So again, it's so baked into who they are and how they're known for it. Within the environment section on operations points, you really get looked at kind of the four environmental footprints that you can have as a business: your greenhouse gas emissions, your energy usage, your water, and your waste. And importantly for a lot of companies on this call, really looking at the environment IBMs, the resource conservation would most likely be relevant for you guys. I think resource conservation, potentially toxin reduction. It's very rare that companies can go for 2 IBMs. B Lab are quite strict on that. It does sometimes happen. But I think resource conservation would be the most likely one for you guys. So EV, the company I work for, which is electric car sharing, this is the environmental IBM that we're going for. So it's essentially by EV existing, people sharing cars, it means there's less cars on the road, which means we're reducing the amount of the things that are made. So Keep Cup is another example of that. So by Keep Cup existing, it means that there's less waste going to landfill. So yeah, and then in terms of toxin reduction, just an example there, Whole Kids is a B Corp, they're a organic baby food company. So by existing, they are preventing the toxins used in mainstream agriculture seeping into the ecosystem. So by being an organic brand, they actually meet that one. The IBMs can be quite tricky to get your head around. Like I've been doing this for 3 years and I still get stumped on some of them. We have to kind of chat to B Lab about, is this what this means? But I think looking at companies that have achieved IBMs, because they're very hard to get, B Lab are quite hard on the kind of the verification of them. You can have a look on the B Corp directory. You can see companies that have achieved IBMs on there. So there's a business that you think is a little bit similar to yours and they're a B Corp, have a look in the directory and see if they've gone through any IBMs, and that would be a good guide if it's something that would be relevant to your business model. And finally, with the customers, on the operations side, it really looks at how you're assessing your products and services, you're monitoring customer satisfaction, and also how you're defining your outcomes as a business, right? So really thinking the difference between output and outcome. An output is you're providing a product or service. An outcome is that you are changing attitudes or behaviors. So it's a very hard thing to define and very hard thing to measure, but is really important. And it's a shame that the customer section is the smaller section. It tends to be only 5 points in the scheme of things for the whole assessment, but it's actually one of the most important things, because if you were defining at the beginning, your mission is you want to create this world, you want to solve this problem. How are you actually proving that you're doing that, right? So it's a very tricky thing. And I think that in terms of the actual IBMs, these really come back to who your customers are for the most part. So a good example here is there's an IBM for supporting underserved or purpose-driven enterprises. Good example is Portable, who are a B Corp from Melbourne. They're a web design and product agency, but they work with a lot of not-for-profits and also for government agencies. So they are helping other companies to do good. And then impact improvement. So all B consultants and their businesses can go for this one. Through us existing, we are helping our customers have more, sort of do well in the world, and have better impact. But yeah, it's in terms of points from the IBMs, if you ever see a company who's just over the line of sort of 80 points, between 80 and 90, they most likely won't have an IBM, obviously, except for that governance IBM, which every company has to have. When you see companies having sort of above 90 and into the hundreds, that's usually because they've got an IBM. So an IBM can be anywhere up to 45 additional points. So it's usually some of the IBMs are only a few points extra, but some of them can really go. That's how you see those B Corps getting much more points. So don't worry if none of these IBMs seem really relevant to your business. There are other IBMs, but you don't need one to become a B Corp, but it's just good to know that there are ones out there if it's something that you're currently doing and you want to shoot for. Okay, so in terms of how you become a B Corp, so I've mentioned that you need this kind of 80 points at the moment, and this will be changing next year. We're not sure if the point system will change, but you will have to meet these 10 criteria areas from midpoint of next year. But for now, it's just getting the 80 points, amending your constitution, and also paying a submission fee. So there's a $250 submission fee for all businesses. There's also a verification fee, which they introduced this year, which is it's a bit unfortunate for smaller businesses because this never existed before. It's a minimum of $1,500. It's on a sliding scale of your revenue as a business. So I think if your revenue is under 2 million a year, you'll be on the 1,500, which is the minimum one. So this is essentially, once you go into the verification stage, you'll have to pay this. And then once you're certified, you'll pay an annual certification fee. Again, certification fees this year went up. It will be a minimum of $2,500 per year going forward. I think that they've kind of they've halted those for a time being until kind of a number of companies can go through, because obviously if you started the process of becoming a B Corp and you thought it was the certification fee was half of that, it can be quite a shock. So definitely have a look on the B Lab website for the most up-to-date information on fees. And especially if you're over $2 million in revenue, you might want to see how much more that those verification and certification fees are. And that annual certification fee does have to be paid every year as well. Something just to keep in mind. So before you start this process, it's really important to understand what the impact is you want to create. So really good way to do this is to align yourself with the Sustainable Development Goals. This could be a very easy exercise to do, or at least just jot down what is the impact that you want to have on the world, and what is the world that you want to see through the business that you do. So you cannot solve every world problem as a company. It'd be great. But it's really important you identify what are the issues that are material to your company. So what is material to you as a company founder? What is material to your industry? And what is material to your stakeholders? What do they care about? So by really understanding what is the impact that you want to have, then you'll be able to be laser focused as you go through the assessment, because you cannot get the full 200 points off the bat. You have to start small. You have to walk before you can run. And impact is something that is about continued improvement. So it is something that you will be building on over. So maybe you get to a point in 10 years' time where you're having impact on all the 17 SDGs. But understanding where you can have an impact, kind of today is really key before heading into the assessment itself. That's the best bit of advice I could give. And great quote here: you can't improve what you don't measure. B Corp is very much about tracking, setting goals, and working towards those goals. So you could just be like, at the moment, we do so much great stuff, but unless there's a kind of clear roadmap of what the next 12 months are and what you want to achieve in terms of your impact, it'll be very hard to kind of report on that and understand if you're actually living out your mission and achieving your vision. So this is this impact process. This is probably the biggest thing you can take away today, right? So whether you become a B Corp or not, you should start thinking about impact the way that you do about your business goals. So every year, whether that's the financial year or calendar year, set some goals, making sure that your stakeholders are involved in that process. Throughout the year, calendar year or financial year, track on that, have regular check-ins, make sure you're accountable. And at the end of the year, report on that. Make sure that your stakeholders have transparency about how you're doing on your impact. This is impact on people and planet. This is everything within the B Corp assessment. This is, the impact that you have as a business beyond the kind of the metrics of, increasing your business goals. And this could be in the form of an impact report, a sustainability report, transparency report, whatever you call it, or it could just be a page on your website, or it could just be an email you do to your stakeholders. Don't be put off by the perfect. The impact is about kind of like at least starting small and having some 12-month goals about what you want to achieve in terms of your impact. So that could be like, you know what? The environment is really material to my industry. So this year I'm going to become carbon neutral. That's a goal. That's an impact goal. And then you report on that. And you know what? Maybe you got distracted this year. Maybe business was down and you didn't achieve that goal. At least report on it. Let your stakeholders know I had this like intention, but it was difficult. Like, again, the thing about impact is it's a constant balance. You need to also keep the lights on. That's that balance about still driving a profit, because you can't have any impact if there is no business. I'm a bit conscious of time, so I'm probably going to skip over the last bits quite quickly. Little roadmap of the timings for becoming a B Corp. It fluctuates the time from when you submit to actually when you get verified and then certified. We've seen it extend out to 8 to 12 months. At the moment, for small businesses, about 3 months. So after you've been in business 12 months, you submit your application. You probably wait 3 months until you're in the verification stage, another couple of months to be verified, and then you can announce you're a B Corp, and then you can recertify every 3 years. So what are the considerations? This is probably the second most important thing to take away from today. Cost. So obviously there's the certification, there's the application fee, verification fee, and the annual certification fee. Is this something you can commit to? The other thing is consultants. You can 100% do this on your own. What we find with small businesses is that it's hard to find the time. and you might want to bring in a consultant. That might not necessarily be a B Corp consultant. It might be for your employee policies, you bring in a people and culture person, but you might need some extra help in this process. That's something to just keep in mind. And then also the cost of initiatives. So if you are, for example, going, you know what, we're going to donate 3% of revenue to charitable causes. That's our goal for the next 12 months. That's obviously going to have a cost associated with it. You can become a B Corp without having to commit, financial, like kind of donations and things like that. You don't necessarily have to give company equity to employees. You don't have to give bonuses. Remember, you can choose your path to 80 points. The biggest cost as a business is your time, because it takes on average 160 to 200 hours of work, depending on how much you've already got in place. But putting policies in place, engaging stakeholders, making sure that many people in your team are involved in this. This shouldn't just be you as a business leader. You should be getting other people in the team involved in the process, because remember, that's a core pillar of what it means to be a B Corp, is stakeholder engagement. So can you carve out the time now, this 160 to 200 hours over the next 6 months, to put everything in place? It's so important to set yourself up as a sustainable business, but you also might be in this place where you're really trying to just get clients in or get financing. So it's that real balance of, have you got that time? And then will you have that time in the future? So B Corp isn't about putting everything in place now, we get the certification and we're done. This is the new way that you will do business. So you will be thinking about impact all the time, and you should be having regular check-ins. It shouldn't be like, oh crap, it's like we're recertifying in a few months' time. I haven't thought about anything B Corp related in 3 years. You will need to be thinking about how you can have better impact. But thinking about your impact is going to help your business. It's going to create a better culture for your staff. It's going to engage you with your community. It's going to have a better rapport with your customers that can help you improve your product. So don't think of it as this thing over here, oh God, we've got to do impact, we've got to do B Corp stuff. It actually will become the way that you do business. But it's just really important that you're going to have to create thinking space to incorporate it into how you do business on a daily basis. And then the changing standards, just to flag that. Will you be able to meet the new standards going forward? There is a lot of literature online about how things are changing. And then can you commit to continued improvement? So again, it's kind of like, if you score 90 points now, you're doing lots of great stuff, you put this great stuff in place. Being a B Corp and thinking about impact you can't be 90 points in 3 years' time. You have to think about improving. And again, that's kind of going back to, are you in this mind frame that this is going to change the way that you approach business? It's going to be about conscious business. It's going to be about thinking about your impact just as much as about growing your business and growing your revenue. So yeah, that is so a lot of information. I feel like I went at 100 miles an hour the last 5 minutes there.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. I'll remove your spotlight just so we can see some people's faces. Thank you so much. I've heard you speak about this so many times, but I feel like I learn something new every single time you talk about it. We've got a few questions in the chat, so I might just start with these. And then people feel free to just jump in and we can have a chat more openly. But shall we just ask, she wanted you to ask if you could clarify about the need. She'd heard previously that there was need for 3 years of revenue before starting the process rather than 1 year.
No, 12 months. 12 months of business. I mean, look, there's some IBMs that want to see previous years, but if you've only been in business for 12 months, it's, there's nothing you can show before that. And yeah, no, I mean, 12 months is the point. So yeah, you should be fine.
Yeah, great. Good news for the new startups. Vern has a question asking what happens if you're using a co-working space. So Vern, I don't know if you're still offline. They seem to. Oh no, there you are. Sorry. Hi. Do you mind just clarifying? Sorry, what you were referring to?
Yeah, basically we don't have our own physical space, so a lot of things that environmental impact might not be something of our control. How do we do that?
That's a very good question, and it's really frustrating because it's like, I mean, look, there are quite a few B Corp co-working spaces as well, so picking a B Corp co-working space such as the Hub or the Commons is a good place to start. Remember, environment is only one of the 5 pillars. So it's not going to be, it won't restrict you from becoming a B Corp. It does restrict how many points you can get in the environment section, but there's other things within there. Obviously, you can't control the water, the waste, but then most co-working spaces will have recycling. But your greenhouse gas emissions as a business, you can control, because the co-working is just a part of that. So that could be the area that you lean into. And then it's really about advocacy, right? So it's working with your co-working space and it's working with them to improve their impact. So this really goes into kind of the supply chain in the community section as well, that there's so many things with your suppliers. You can vet them on the kind of their social and environmental impact, but sometimes there's like a supplier you just really need to work with because they're really crucial to your business and they're not doing great things, but it's the impact and the advocacy. And I think it's like a lot of companies are fearful of this. They're like, oh gosh, if we start shouting about how everyone needs to be carbon neutral and everyone needs to, reduce their emissions and everybody needs to think about, ethics within their business, there's going to be fingers pointing because we're not perfect. But advocacy is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And it's starting the conversation as well. So if you're thinking about becoming a B Corp and you're starting this journey, talk about that with your suppliers, obviously with your team, with your community, because it's about kind of spreading the word about what this is, and it just makes people start thinking, and then they start to do a bit better. Cool.
Great, thank you. And then Tina's just asked, she's keen to understand the provisional approval process. At what point do you apply?
When do you submit? Well, my thinking is when you're pretty sure you've got evidence for every single question that you've ticked. There is a bit of a wait, obviously, from when you submit and then when you get verified and then when you get certified. And some companies try to take advantage of that kind of waiting time. They kind of go, well, there's a few policies that I'm missing, but I can submit now and I know I'm not going to get seen for a couple of months. But my advice, because I see, some companies sit in the queue for 8 months, some get rushed through in 2 months, is that just be really confident that you have evidence for everything when you submit. And you don't actually have to submit the evidence when you send off your assessment, right? So you send off the assessment, you can keep your evidence in a separate drive or Dropbox or whatever, and you will only be asked for evidence on specific questions when you go into the verification stage. You don't actually need that evidence when you submit, but it is best practice, because the worst thing in the world is if you are being verified and you don't have evidence, and you kind of remember that you are doing this thing, but you're like, oh, I can't even remember where it was. Did we have a policy? Where has it gone? And you just don't want to be stressed out at that point. And if you don't have the evidence, they will be knocking points off. So, B Lab is very under-resourced. It is a nonprofit, and that's why fees have gone up lately. And so, it's good to not waste their time either. I think that, I always make sure clients I work with that they don't submit until they're kind of happy that they've got evidence for everything.
Great. And then a question from Mark. Mark, if you want to add anything, feel free to jump in, but asking specifically about how circular economy principles lay in the assessment, and if that is impacted in the new standards, if you know anything yet.
Yeah, thanks for the session, Kirsty. Yeah, that's exactly right. I was just trying to understand if that's part of the environment section of the assessment.
Yeah, it really depends on the type of business. So when you first set up your assessment, it asks you what industry you're in. There's kind of 5 main categories. There's service with minor environmental footprint, service with major, manufacturing and / wholesale, agriculture, and I've forgotten the other one. I think it's retail. I can't remember. But then within those, there's like 80 different subcategories. Like it kind of goes granular, right? For product-based businesses, I see in the environment section, there's a lot of questions around life cycle assessment. There's a lot about, do you have any repurpose or reuse or recycle programs in place? There's really nothing in service-based businesses for that. There's like a couple of questions in recycling. So, and then if you're going for an IBM, definitely. And like I said, the the resource conservation IBM is probably the most applicable for businesses and circularity, and which is, you know, there's going to be heaps of questions in there. But yeah, it's product-based businesses. Like I'm thinking, like I've got like a couple of fashion clients, a bedding company, like there's a lot of questions in there regarding that, which is great. So it's definitely, but it's not like the core focus. I think the IBMs are going to be a lot more tailored. Mm-hmm.
Great. Out of interest, is anyone online either already a B Corp or has started the process at all? Has anyone considered it or is considering it now?
One?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yes. Well, brilliant. Yeah. I mean, look, it's very daunting. It's like there's, you know, 200 questions. The questions themselves can be a little bit Americanized or legalese language. There is so much information online. You don't have to work with a consultant. I'd say that most companies bring me on when they've just kind of started and they've run out of time, but you can do it on your own. There's heaps and heaps of content online. All the B Corps share their experience. And so it's like, it's something that you can do. It just takes up a bit of headspace to kind of like learn about it. But it's gonna change the way that you operate as a company. It's going to change your whole view on what the purpose of business is. And you'll think about impact in everything that you do. And it's just a very refreshing way to look at, you know, the purpose of capitalism. So obviously I've drunk the Kool-Aid and I'm kind of quite embedded in this movement, but I just feel like the world would be a much better place if everybody lived up to the B Corp principles.
Perfect, thank you. And like you said earlier, but even if you aren't becoming a B Corp, the framework is online and free. So that's also a really great tool if you see it being something down the line, perhaps based on costs or your maturity. That's good that it's there, and I'll make sure to actually link that with the link when we put the recording up, and also when we send that out to you as well. But thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Kirsty again for jumping on. And I'll be in touch soon with a recording and also invitation to register for next month's webinar.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.